point won or lost this weekend can and will reverberate loudly come October. So the pressure to perform is on, and the time allowed for sorting out problems over. Today, right now, winning is the only thing that matters. 30,000 fans here at the Atlanta Dragway know this to be true, and now along with you, we'll witness horsepower without equal as we separate winners from losers. Welcome, everyone, to Atlanta Dragway, just outside of Commerce, Georgia, for American Sports Cavalcade coverage of the 13th Annual Fram Southern Nationals. No top fuel team better fits our opening statement than that of the Austin family. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Evans, and I probably don't have to tell you all of the trials and tribulations Pat Austin has been through. Numerous crew chiefs, engine difficulties. They had to make a statement here in Atlanta, and boy, did they. In qualifying, 300 miles an hour. Then in round one earlier today against Danielle DePorter, well, I'll just let the interview tell you the story. We have a new king of speed, 303 mile an hour, Pat Austin.
Wow. Hey, boy, the Syntec family ought to be happy today. I mean, with all the help, those Dynamax and Red Wing is just proud to be part of that deal. And to run that quick with all the guys we got now, I mean, we got a real good group of guys over there, and I just very happy for my dad and Frank Bradley, everybody. Way to go, and we're going on to the next round.
Wow. In round two, in just a few minutes, it'll be Pat Austin up against that other king of speed, Kenny Bernstein. Now, there's another really great story developing here. It's long been rumored that IndyCar star John Andretti would drive baseball star Jack Clark's Taco Bell Top Fuel car. They debuted here, qualified well, and in round number one, it was two Italian race car drivers from Pennsylvania, and the result might surprise you. John Andretti didn't know if he won or not. You certainly did in your first ever contest. You take out the five-time champ. He's not pleased.
Well, I mean, I didn't know if I won or not. I didn't see him, but, you know, you never know. I was just happy that I got down there, and, you know, I'm just really pleased. I mean, the Taco Bell crew has done a great job, so I'm really pleased.
They really have. And Joe AMATO, he told you last night that he had a hard time staying in his own lane in IndyCar racing.
Yeah, I was worrying about him coming over and trying to squeeze me a little bit. That's what he said. If I was ahead of him, he was going to try and squeeze me out.
Good addition to the sport, though.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
And boy, does Joe AMATO handle defeat well. That's a class act. Well, for a guy who's only making left turns onto the return road, John Andretti is doing awfully well here. Next round, he's got Tommy Johnson Jr. Better sharpen up that reaction time, John. For the funny car slant on things, let's go to Brock Yates.
Well, Steve, I don't have to tell you that John Force is one of the great pros and motivating both himself and his crew. And he's got this picture on the wall here on the side of his truck, 506, John. And I'll tell you what, the other car is that McDonald's car, Cruz Bedregan, that you face right now in the second round. And I'm sure there's a major significance in that 506.
Well, there really is. It was actually the run the year before against McDonald's at Houston when we ran 514, and he ran slower at 516, and he beat us. And I wrote on a picture on the wall that never underestimate your opponent. And when we came back to Houston and I beat him, I put it up there, the 506, just to keep reminding myself of what he did to me.
Okay, now, he's got lane choice. You had troubles in the first round. You were pedaling it all over the racetrack. Big problems. So you're kind of the underdog right now going into round two.
Well, we really are. We were over-aggressive. We did run 512 3 times during qualifying. So Coil and Bernie's really got this thing, you know, putting some numbers on the board. And like I say, first round's always tricky. We're lucky enough to get by it, and now we have to choose our opponents as we go. He's really slow, so we just bring her back a little bit, get her to go down the track. We should be okay.
Okay, man, go get him. Going to be a great race. And now, for more on Pro Stock, let's go to my pal Bob Fry.
Brock, this is the Pro Stock Dodge driven by Scott Geoffrion. This car differs from all the other Pro Stocks in two major ways. First of all, it is the only Mopar car running in Pro Stock. And second, it's a relatively short wheelbase car, and that has given this team fits on some racetracks around the country. And Scott, I know that right now you guys are petrified of running in that left lane.
Well, I don't think we're petrified. We learned how to get down it yesterday, and I think everybody out here prefers the right-hand lane, so we'll just keep open for lane choice.
You guys keep getting that lane choice because you've been right on WJ all weekend long, just a couple of hundredths behind. You think this might be your weekend to pick off the win?
Well, I don't really want to get into any of that. I just look at them one round at a time, and I know that elusive win's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, so I'm not really that concerned with looking at that right now.
Everybody else has been concerned with looking at the Dodge throughout the first couple of races this year. Let's pick up action now in Top Fuel and go back to Steve Evans.
Okay, thank you, Bob Fry. And there are the eyes of John Andretti. And Brock Gates, anyone that can come down the front straight at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at about 230 miles an hour and turn left ought to be able to drive about anything.
You know, Steve, a long time ago, Roger Ward, who won the Indianapolis 500 twice, told me the mark of a race driver was the ability to handle surpluses of horsepower. And if you want surpluses of horsepower, this is a place to find it.
All right, if you want tough competition, it's the Mopar Express Lube car of Tommy Johnson Jr. Andretti qualified only number 12, but let's remember this was his debut performance. He came in here actually, though, with about 40 runs under his belt. Jack Clark took Tim Farrell, that young man, the crew chief, and this whole team to Dallas Motorplex, the Texas Motorplex in Dallas, and they burned up drum after drum of nitromethane. Expensive, but it got everybody purposeful. It got the crew working together. John got comfortable doing burnouts and launches, and boy, it's paid big dividends. Here he is again in round number 2 up against Tommy Johnson Jr. From Indianapolis, Indiana, he won the Surfers Paradise race in Australia 2 years ago in his Indy car and hopes to win here in Atlanta. Tommy Johnson Jr. has been runner-up in the Mopar Express Lube car, but is yet to win his first big race. Consistently in the 4s, he is tickling 300 miles an hour. So is Andretti, for that matter.
They sure are. Both these young men run very, very well in qualifying, and Tommy Johnson Jr., as you said, is absolutely due for a major victory.
There's Andretti pulling ahead on the far side. Andretti driving away as Tommy Johnson Jr. falls way off his earlier performances to only a 5.11. Andretti 492 with a big speed, 298 miles an hour. Bob Fry is with car owner Jack Clark back at the starting line.
Hey, Jack, this is some way to start out the Top Fuel program, huh?
Yeah, we're very excited for Taco Bell and Taco Bell Express Top Fuel Drags. I mean, it's an exciting day. Our first time out. The crews performed tremendous. The driver, I mean, I'm just going to be thrilled with the way everybody's got the job done today.
Driver's earning his big bucks today. Big win for Jack Clark and the Taco Bell gang.
It's not a home run yet, but it certainly is at least a ground rules double. All right, there in the John Forest pit, they're getting ready to face off with Cruz Pedregon. A race none of us want to miss. You shouldn't either. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Automobile you see coming to the line, Mike Dunn on board the Darrell Gwynn Top Fuel Dragster. He will face off against Pat Dakin. A 495 for Dunn. He has lane choice. But before we see that race, let's go to Steve.
John Andretti said, did I win? Did I win? Yeah, you won everything but the starting line war. He got you by a couple of hundreds, and you drilled him with a 492, 298.
Well, you know, the car's running great. It's making up for, I guess, my mistakes.
That wasn't a mistake. He leaves on everybody.
Well, you know, I need to pick it up a bit if I'm going to make it through the semifinals or the finals. But, I mean, I'm ecstatic that we're making it this far. I mean, the Taco Bell team is just doing a great job, and we'll just keep plugging along until we have to go home.
You know, your cousin Michael having a tough year overseas. If he hears you win your first ever drag race, he's going to go nuts.
Well, you know, he'll be happy for me, and he'll win a Formula 1 race this year yet, too.
I know he will. We all hope he does. Thanks.
Let's get this family tree straight. Uncle Mario, that's Michael's dad. Aldo is Mario's fraternal twin brother, and that is John's father. How about that? Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense to me. All right, we're looking on here as they get Mike Dunn's car ready to go to the starting line. The La Victoria Salsa Special owned by Darrell Gwynn. In round 1, Mike faced off with Ed McCullough, the Winston points leader, coming into this event in the McDonald's car. And watch what happened. This was earlier today. McCullough with big problems right after the mark. Mike Dunn won it at 495. The ace was history. Well, when you're the points leader by a very narrow margin, a first-round loss ace is obviously the last thing a man needs.
Well, we sort of struggled coming in here, Steve. You know, it's things haven't been right all weekend, but you know, it's all we can do is look ahead and go on to the next one, straighten this thing out, and go from there.
What happened that time?
It shook the tire real hard, and it was you know, coming loose. So, you know, it was all over.
When Eddie Hill won his first-round race, he became the points leader. Now it's Pat Dakin, Dayton, Ohio, Ruppin Dakin, a team from the 70s back for the 90s, up against Mike Dunn, the Darrell Gwynn car. Brock?
Well, Steve, at first glance, this looks like a bit of an overmatch because of Dunn's strong running. But remember, Dakin, who qualified 16, knocked off the #1 qualifier, Scott Kalita, in the first round. So upset in mind on the part of Pat Dakin.
Dakin, a beautiful leap, and the blower belt comes off. Mike Dunn all over the racetrack, but he hangs on to a 5:06 at 278 miles an hour, falling off his earlier performances a bit, but the weather's changed and the track has changed. Well, Pat Dakin is out of here, but Bob Fry is back at the starting line with car owner Darrell Gwynn.
Darrell, boy, the team's looking good here now in the semifinals. Could this be the day?
Well, I sure hope so, Bob. You know, we're taking it one round at a time, and this stuff ain't easy. The track is tricky, the weather's tricky, and these cars are tricky, so one round at a time.
Nobody said it would be easy, did they?
You got it.
Darrell Gwynn and his team into the semifinals.
All right, let's have another look at this, and you will see the blower belt fly off on Pat Dakin's car right there. That ended the race and moves Mike Dunn into the semifinals. Let's go to Steve with Mike.
Boy, Mike, shades of the funny car days. This thing was a handful. What was going on with it?
I mean, it was on a decent run out there, and it got out about, 400 or 500 feet. Boy, it just got real loose. Motor went way up, and she went sideways, and too far down the track. I didn't really want to lift right there. Figured we'd just get her down the track, and luckily we got the win.
Probably going to cost you lane choice, but for the dragsters, the lanes seem to be okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's much difference. It really surprised me that, kind of caught me off guard that would spin out, that far down track. The left lane had the tendency to do that because of the bump there, and yet we did in the right lane. So we'll make adjustment. I'm sure they'll put us in that lane. We'll be all right.
You can bet on that.
All right, we've got some more round 2 top fuel action coming up right now. That is Michael Brotherton backing into your camera view here. In the far lane is the current and brand new points leader, Eddie Hill, who jumped in the points lead, as you said, Steve, when Ed McCullough dropped out in the first round.
Eddie Hill in the new Nuclear Banana, qualified #2 to 487. He dropped Don Perdomo in round #1. He is flying. Michael Brotherton, best effort in a while, qualified #7 at a 494, has Gene Snow as his crew chief. That might answer that question. And he dispatched Shelly Anderson in round #1. So now it is Hill and Brotherton. Eddie, with lane choice, he selects the smoother right-hand or far lane. This car, a twin to the one he had over 500 runs on. Straight and strong, Brotherton giving it everything he's got, but it's not enough for Eddie Hill. A 485 all-time Atlanta Dragway track record, a speed of 294 miles an hour. That was all Eddie Hill, even left first. Incredible job.
A great pass by Eddie Hill, just as straight as a die. As we go back to the starting line, that is Dale Armstrong working with Kenny Bernstein, his longtime car owner and driver, as they get the Budweiser King ready to go against the man who just ran earlier, 303 miles an hour, Pat Austin. This will be interesting. Why? Because Kenny Bernstein, of course, held the record that Pat Austin just broke. So, will there be a revenge factor? You bet. But first, before we see this race, let's go down to Steve with Eddie Hill.
Eddie Hill loves all the nice little things in drag racing, like first in the 4s and track records, and you just got another one at 485.
485, outstanding. All right, I like this new Pennzoil car better than I did the old one. And
you loved it.
And that old car was some car. If we're still running this in 520 laps or 530, whatever that other, this will be some car, huh?
And you know the good news is, Jeff, have a look at that motor, Eddie. It's absolutely clean, absolutely dry, didn't singe a thing.
Oh, that's the good news. We hate to see oil seeping out of any bits and pieces on those motors. That means a rebuild. As the crew of Pat Austin gets ready to go, what more is there to say about him, Steve? He's won about everything in Top Alcohol Funny Car and now holds the speed record in Top Fuel.
And he has lane choice coming in over Kenny Bernstein, 4-time Funny Car winner. Dale Armstrong trying to make him a first-time Top Fuel Winston champion. So Bernstein in the left lane where he really didn't want to be. Not that it's bad necessarily. You just want to have all the aces up your sleeve. Pat Austin. Here, the two fastest drag racers in the world. 303 miles an hour, 301 miles an hour. Right here for your edification at the Fram Southern Nationals in Atlanta. Oh, boy, Pat Austin just couldn't muster enough elapsed time to run with Bernstein here in the second round. Bernstein, a 4.90 at 2.99 even to Austin's 4.93. and Bernstein had an incredible reaction time. Bob?
Well, I don't know about you, but that was a fun race for us to watch.
That was a real good one. That was a real good one. Those guys are strong, and we just planned on taking it a step at a time and trying not to make a mistake and throw it away, and it works for us.
Seems you got a real handle on the track here this weekend.
Well, that 90 looks pretty good, but Eddie's 85 looks better. But we'll see what we can do.
Now we'll find out who we're going to crown as the king of this one in just a little bit.
We sure are, Bob, as we get Eddie Hill and Kenny Bernstein in part of the Top Fuel Final Four. That's going to be fascinating to watch that. And here's an even more interesting one. John Andretti, the rookie, against Mike Dunn in the other half of the Final Four. Boy, I can't wait to see that one.
The way these cars are these days, you probably never saw Pat, but you beat him convincingly, 490 to a 493.
Well, I didn't know. Like you say, sitting in them, you can't see, but it was a good run for us. You know, we didn't think the track would hold too much. We didn't give it much. We were just hoping to repeat.
You're an IndyCar team owner. How about John Andretti?
He's having a great day, isn't he?
How about Eddie Hill?
Well, Eddie Hill's having even a better day, but Andretti's making us all look bad. Looks easy.
You got to race Eddie next round.
Yeah, we got our hands full.
So Eddie Hill next up for Kenny Bernstein. Meanwhile, back in the starting line, that's Gary Bolger. He goes against Tom Hoover in Funny Car. We'll see him and a whole lot more right after this.
Brock Yates and Bob Bright, and it's the start of Funny Car, round number 2. The same kind of engines you saw on the dragsters, only mounted in front of the drivers, disguised with some Detroit-looking fiberglass or carbon fiber bodies, and all in all, one of the most spectacular classes in all of drag racing. And we have got Tom Hoover right there, the Pioneer Electronic Special, up against one of my favorite guys to talk to bench race with, and to interview, Gary Bolger. Just a funny man who drives for a funny family out of funny Chicago, Illinois. And they're just here to have a great time and maybe win them a couple of rounds. And darned if they don't do a lot.
They sure do. They make a lot of horsepower with not a whole lot of money out of Linwood, Illinois. Not big sponsorship. Kind of the essence of the sport of drag racing. They compete hard, race hard. Against Tom Hoover in this particular case. Of course, his dad, George, a long-time fixture on the Winston drag racing scene, and he and his kid have done real well. And he ain't no kid anymore, Tom Hoover, but still runs hard. Remember now, Bolger upset Del Worsham in round 1.
Look at this, the little budget car hanging in there with Hoover, but Hoover extends it at the far end with one of his best numbers in a while. A 5.28 second elapsed time at just 269 miles an hour. Tells me they're saving that car just a bit. Let's go to Bob Fry at the starting line with George.
To the semifinals. Hey, Pa, the kids are in the semis. Let's look lively here. Good job.
What am I to say? It's about time, wasn't it?
Now they can just one more and into the finals. Think you can do it?
Well, you got to figure out luck, too, you know.
These guys can make their own luck. One of the grand old men in drag racing, Pa Hoover.
Well, Bob, this man got a little bit of luck. That's Chuck Etchells, and he was supposed to race upset-minded Whit Bazemore. Whit, unfortunately, could not answer the bell because of mechanical problems, so it will be Etchells on a single here, but obviously that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to lay down a very good ET to get lane choice. Ironically, if Bazemore had shown up, he would have had lane choice. But first, let's go to Steve.
Well, Tom, you've been shutting the car off early almost every pass. You did again, and it still ran a 5.28.
Yeah, Steve, we've been playing with a new fuel system, like always, a new Cannon clutch system. I've been skating here for 4 runs. We're finally getting a handle on it here, and there's more left, and I think we'll do very well.
You may have to run it to the finish line from now on, but...
I think it's serious now. We got a little confidence. Let's see what happens next round.
All right, we'll be watching.
Well, Steve, Chuck Etchells, who's getting ready to make that single run, has now got some real help. Tim Richards comes away from the Joe AMATO team with a couple of intermediate stops to take over that crew chief job. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people think this guy is going to be a serious player all season.
One of those people is John Forrest, because Chuck Etchells out-qualified him here. In fact, qualified number 1, Etchells did, at a 5.09, even though John threw 3 5.12s at him. He just could not get down to the O's. Tim Richards standing directly behind the car where he feels you can learn the most. All that black stuff was clutch dust. Woo, and getting real close to the fence when the parachute breaks a couple of lines as Etchells lays down a nice 5.26. Looks like maybe Tim Richards got a little conservative here in the second round, unsure of the racetrack, and with no opponent, why abuse your stuff? Bob?
Tim, you guys ran the 5:09 in the left lane and had a bye run this time and took the right side. What's the strategy?
Well, normally we would have been on the left side again. I felt as though the left lane was plenty good when we started the race, but being as Bazemore didn't show up and he had choice, I decided to try it.
So timing could be everything in the key to this one, right?
Oh, you got to have the luck, and that's what we're having right now.
That and a lot of horsepower, too.
Well, that's what the GWYNN crew is looking for, because they're going to have to race John Andretti. How about that? That's coming up from here in Atlanta. Stay with us.
Atlanta, Georgia, the Fram Southern Nationals. That is Eddie Hill, the new track record holder at 485. Taking a look at all of those spark plugs. Let's remember there's 16 of them in these engines. Dual spark plugs, dual magnetos, and the same equipment is on these funny cars. And there is Cruz Pedregon and John Force. This is worth, well, at least half the price of admission. Cruz Pedregon, the 1992 champion. John Force, 1990 and 91 champion. And Force has T-shirts made that says John Force, 1993, the comeback tour.
Well, there you see over the shoulder of John Force as Austin Coil backs him into position. And I'll tell you what, John Force is intent on getting by Cruz Pedregon because, of course, that famous run of race victories at the end of the 92 season took the championship away from John and gave it to this young man from Moore Park, California, in a sensational comeback.
That's right. He qualified number 10 at a 5:30. Not much there. Qualified number 2, as we told you, with all those 5:12s with John Force. John got by Gordon Menu in round number 1, and now the lid comes down. If you're at all claustrophobic, the funny car category is not for you. All right, McDonald's against Castro, Force against Pedregon. That's Mike Green, the crew chief, on the big red Oldsmobile, walking away. No sign on his face, a poker face, as he always wears, much like Austin Coil. These guys will make great actors. Speaking of great actors, there's Buster Gouch, NHRA's official starter between the cars, watching to make sure everybody stays. Oh, Pedregon left too soon. Go figure. John Force will win it at 5:38, 273 miles an hour. Pedregon's performance probably wouldn't have won it anyway at 5:49, 282, but there is something truly unexpected. A rare mistake by Pedregon.
Austin, you pick up 200 valuable Winston points there. Are they extra valuable because of who you just beat?
Well, I think that's true. By the end of the year, they'll probably be a real contender. We certainly, gave away a lot of clutch in order to be sure we'd get down there, and that's what it took.
538 wasn't overpowering, but they're in the semifinals.
And thanks in some ways to this man in the far lane, Cruz Pedregon, who jumped the light so early, you wonder if there was some kind of a mechanical problem with the McDonald's car. It's just uncharacteristic of Cruz to do it, and especially at the level of magnitude that it happened. So it could have been a mechanical problem. As we watch Freddie Neely come to the line, and he faces a man who has been so strong and shown so much muscle in funny car competition over the last season or so, and that is Al Hoffman. Okay, as Hoffman completes his burnout, let's go down to Steve with John Force.
Well, the burger car goes to the barn with a red light. How about that?
Honest to God, there is a God. I can't believe this. That happened. I mean, he was motoring around me, and I seen him come up next to me, and I'm thinking, I'm trucking. I got in the center, and all he's coming down through there, but he's got a nose on me, and I never figured a red light, he wouldn't have drove it that far. Maybe he didn't know.
He did not know. A 5:38 Yabloss lane, choice to Tom Hoover.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it does. Okay, we're struggling here, but we're having a great time. Everything's functioning. Sponsors are happy. Let's do it again.
I love him.
All right, Al Hoffman and Freddie Neely backing into position, and I'll tell you what, Steve, Freddie Neely can knock off anybody in this business, so don't discount him, even though Al Hoffman qualified number 4, but Neely got into the race in number 5 position. He beat Paul Smith in round number 1 as Al Hoffman got by Gary Salone in round number 1, so this could be a good one.
Well, the combination of Tom Anderson, who just lifted up the body, and car owner driver Al Hoffman won $25,000 2 weeks ago in Rockingham. Freddie Neely, they don't race this car all that often. That is Ronnie Swearingen on the left front fender, who also is the crew chief for Tommy Johnson Jr. Tommy's out of here. Ronnie can now devote full time to that funny car, and it may just fly. The forever young car of Freddie Neely. Dick Brown Racing. Neely was a little late. Hoffman with a hole shot. Neely comes back. Unbelievable. Freddie Neely appeared to be whipped. A 5:23 pulls it out over Hoffman's 5:29. The difference at the finish line, 0.08 of a second.
Fast Freddie staying alive.
Oh, man, just barely staying alive. It's a tricky track out here today, and we're having trouble getting our high-powered Ford Probe down the racetrack, down at the other end, but we're getting closer.
Now you got to take on 09 ETCHELLS in the next round. You got enough power?
Oh, yeah, that's okay. We don't lack power.
And they don't lack confidence either.
Well, it's hard to believe that within a matter of 5 seconds you can spot your opponent a big starting line advantage, as Freddie Neely did Al Hoffman, who had a good hole shot, and then drive by him. But that was what Neely did. He was behind at half track, and then suddenly the power came on, and as you can see, Neely drives right around Al Hoffman and into the semifinals. Not by much. It took an electric timer to figure it out, but Neely is in the semifinals, and this is the way it works out. He will face Chuck Etchells, and Freddie will enjoy lane choice. The other pairing, well, that's going to be an interesting one. Veteran Tom Hoover against veteran John Force. Hoover, surprisingly enough, will have lane choice in that matchup.
You won that race by 0.08 of a second, thanks to his little bitty hole shot, but you just gunned him down with a 23.
Steve, we've been struggling here this weekend. Cars, I've been smoking the tires out on the far end. I got a crew that does an excellent job. I got a car owner that has really been good to Ronnie and myself. We're working with a little bit of a handicap here this weekend. As you know, my mother passed away Friday night, and I know she's here with me this weekend, and I know she's riding with me every round.
Gotcha. Good luck, pal.
We'll be back after this.
100 cubic inch, 1,200 horsepower, 5-speed equipped Detroit-like automobiles. I'm Steve Evans, along with Brock Yates and Bob Fry. And if one Johnson ain't enough, there's two of them qualified here, Brock.
And worse yet, they're driving Oldsmobiles that have more power seemingly than anybody else. And this is the dubious honor of Larry Morgan in yet another Oldsmobile to face up to Kurt Johnson. And Johnson qualified number 3, and this is really only his first full season in this kind of competition, and he blew away Rusty Glidden in round number 1. Kurt Johnson not only knows how to drive these things, but he's a fine mechanic and crew chief. Learned everything from his father, and certainly Larry Morgan is also a fine driver in the Oldsmobile class cars. He got by Mark Powick in round number 1, but I'll tell you what, he has his hands full with this Johnson team.
Yeah, only 2 cars qualified quicker than Kurt Johnson, and one was his father, Warren. We'll be seeing later on in this round. He qualified on the pole. So it is Kurt Johnson in his late 20s. Larry Morgan, been around a long time, former U.S. Nationals champion. Still looking for that first Winston crown. RPMs come way up. The line lock holds the car. Puts the brakes on the front wheel. They release the line lock, and they're gone. Kurt Johnson by almost a full car length, and he won it on a hole shot. A 7.199 for Johnson, a 194 for Larry Morgan. Both of them topping 192 miles an hour.
Good drag race, and it was Kurt Johnson in the near lane that launched first by just a wink, and that was sufficient to overcome a slight ET advantage that Larry Morgan laid down. Essentially on the track, it was an equal drag race. Both ran 719s, both ran 192 miles an hour, but it was the 466 reaction time of Johnson versus the 521 of Larry Morgan that spelled the difference. So, Kurt Johnson moves on.
Was that a good drag race?
Yeah, it was fantastic. She shook a little bit in the middle. We changed everything on that run but the driver, so the driver knew he had to change. I got to thank Gary Shamiri, Long Island Dragway, and the Scribner brothers.
Were you sure you had won?
Not really. It shook in the middle a little bit, and it come around. I knew the middle of the track was smoother, so I just let her stay there and hung in there.
You both ran 719.
Did we really? Yeah. Driver did his job, I guess. Huh? Thanks.
He sure did. Learned a lot from the old man, boy, I'll tell you that. Well, we've got a couple of veterans coming to the line, Steve. Frank Iaconio versus Ricky Smith. And these guys have been around pro stock racing longer than I can remember.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, it is really a pleasure to see Frank Iaconio back in the thick of this thing. no longer a non-qualifier. Qualified number 4 at 7:16. He put away Ray Franks in round 1. Ricky Smith running on his own, just kind of refrigerator white Pontiac. He qualified number 12 at a 7:22, and he beat the also resurrected Joe Lapone in round number 1. Iaconio has really found whatever it takes to be competitive, and a great lead by Iaconio. He left on Ricky Smith. Few do that. It is Iaconio all the way. A 7:26 defeats Ricky Smith's 7:31. Iaconio is back at over 190 miles an hour.
All right, down in the starting line, Scott Geoffrion versus David Rampy. Geoffrion, remember, told Bob Fry that he was perfectly happy to stay in the right lane with that Dodge. Rampy, of course, moving up after doing so well in the sportsman classes for a long time in that near lane. So
we would do that well in that lane, but I know how hard you guys have been working to be competitive. It's paid off. Congratulations.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
All right, this one's going to be an interesting race as we watch David Rampy backing into position. David Rampy, as I said earlier, has just come into pro stock ranks, and he got by Mark Osborne in round number 1. He qualified number 7 out of Greenwood, Indiana. Scott Geoffrion, as you know, has had his hands full with that Dodge. He qualified 2nd, though, at a 7:14 and beat Vince Curry in round number 1. So as we're on board with Scott Geoffrion, he's got his hands full with this young man, David Rampy.
Well, he sure does. The main reason he wants to keep that far lane, he thinks the tracks is a little better for that short wheelbase car, as Bob Fry mentioned earlier on. Let's just see how well the Dodge does handle. You're on board pretty straight. That's because Geoffrion's keeping it that way. And Geoffrion just stomps on David Rampy. Left on him, outran him. 7:15, 192 miles an hour for Scott, to a 7:26 at just 189 miles an hour for David Rampy.
Okay, Steve, coming to the line are the participants in what may be the most intense rivalry, certainly in pro stock competition and maybe in all of drag racing. That is Bob Glidden versus the number 1 qualifier, Warren Johnson. These two guys have beat on each other for a long time, and right now it's Warren Johnson who has the advantage. But first, let's go to Steve.
Well, Scott, on this racetrack, I know you'd like to keep lane choice, and a 7:18 is probably going to get it for you.
Well, I'm pretty happy with that. You know, it's Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona crew from Wayne County. They're doing a good job of getting it down this shaky racetrack today, and hey, it makes the driver happy.
We all know you're just a win looking for a place to happen. Maybe it's Atlanta.
I sure feel like it is, but you know, it's a long day yet, and we'll just keep our head to the grindstone and keep things rolling.
All right.
All right, back to the big race down at the other end. This is going to be good. Warren Johnson, as usual, qualified number 1. He had an easy time of beating Lewis Worden in round number 1. Glidden qualified number 7 and got by Bruce Allen. But believe me, this man, Warren Johnson, is just stronger than almost anybody in the business right now. Bob Glidden, well, he's going to have to rely on experience and some real horsepower that he's starting to find in that Ford Probe.
It's a bit of a Hail Mary. Glidden changed everything in that car, like Kurt Johnson said, except the driver, to try to have a shot at Warren Johnson. Glidden wins the starting line war. But Johnson has the muscle. Oh, boy, does he. A 7:14 at 194 miles an hour. Glidden had one of the best lights of his career, but his 7:25 at 190 just wasn't enough.
Well, here's the race again. As Steve said, Glidden caught a 4:13 light, almost perfect, but it simply was not enough to overcome the monster power of that Warren Johnson Oldsmobile, who just lays down yet another enormously good time. 7:14, 194 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour quicker than Bob Glidden, and at a 7:25, he really wasn't in it at all. So the Warren Johnson juggernaut rolls onward. The next potential victim, Frank Iaconio. Johnson has lane choice. The other pair in the final 4, well, that's going to be Kurt Johnson, the son, against Scott Geoffrion. And Scott Geoffrion this time has lane choice against the Oldsmobile.
Just in case any of the competition was getting a little cocky, Warren Johnson flashes a 7:14 on the boards.
Well, the 14 is all right. Some of the other cars are running in the teens also, so we've got a good close drag race here.
And you're going to have lane choice, and that's a big deal, they tell me.
Well, it can be. There's a series of bumps in the left-hand lane, but a little oil in the right-hand lane and even it up in a hurry.
You know, with your shop a half an hour away, more importantly, your bed a half an hour away, that's got to bring a guy in rested.
Well, it does, but this is the only race all year long. In fact, in a long time that I've just been tremendously sick.
Will a dose of the flu slow down Warren Johnson? We'll see. Will Freddie Neely get by Chuck Etchells in the funny car semifinal? We'll see that too. Stick with us from Atlanta.
That is the crew of Minneapolis driver Tom Hoover getting ready to face off with John Forrest in the funny car semifinal. Those are the computer tapes downloaded from the information gathering device in the car and make some decisions based on what they see there. Okay, here we go into Top Fuel. This is the semifinal round, and what a story we've got going here with John Andretti. Brock Yates.
Unbelievable, Steve. He still has lane choice over Mike Dunn, and the kid has just amazed everybody here with his ability to handle this horsepower. Of course, that really is, in a lot of ways, the essence of race driving, the ability to handle surplus horsepower. You sure have it on a Top Fuel car.
That's right, and there is John Andretti. That car was built for a much bigger driver, and he looks like a midget sitting down inside there. John Andretti, driving for baseball star Jack Clark, just walking through the picture there, had, until this weekend, never raced in a straight line. Mike Dunn has never not raced in a straight line.
Well, don't forget, though, they did a lot of testing down in Texas, and a lot of starts, a lot of half-track passes, and then some full passes, and the more Jack Clark and their crew worked with John, the more they felt that he really was ready to go racing without a whole lot of kind of preliminaries.
That's right. John Andretti had more seat time as a beginning drag racer than anybody I've ever heard of, and it cost a lot of money to do that. All right, they're off the mark. Mike Dunn, John Andretti. Andretti had the big top-end power, but it wasn't quite enough. Mike Dunn stops this Cinderella story in the semifinal round with a 495 at 280 miles an hour. And I'm telling you, Andretti was coming. Let's go to Bob Fry on the starting line.
Well, if a 495 and winning a race like that can't bring a smile to your face, I don't know what will, Darrell.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, we've worked awful hard, and we're doing a good job today, and I got to take my hats off to the whole crew, and just ran good enough to win. That's hopefully what we're going to do in the final.
They're going to be in the finals, and they'll look like line drives in the box score.
Let's take another look at that. It was Mike Dunn with better reaction time, and that seemed to make the difference here. As you see, Dunn in the near lane launched really well. John Andretti not all that bad, but it was Dunn who had the lead most of the way. But then Andretti with the big top-end charge, as Steve said, runs 294, but that's not enough to move him on.
Now you can say you beat an Andretti.
Well, that's something. I mean, and the first guy to beat it, Andretti, he's done a real good job. I tell you, Jack Clark put together a real good team, and they can't be ashamed of what they did this year. But we're just happy to have this La Victoria McGuire special in the Top Fuel final.
Would you like to have lane choice? You have a 495 going for you.
Well, it doesn't really matter. I think both lanes are pretty even. You know, we wanted to run a little bit better than that, but we were a little leery of that left lane and that bump out in the middle. So I think we can get after it a little bit on the next run, no matter which lane we got.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Well, in just a minute, we're going to find out who Mike Dunn will race, because that is Eddie Hill, who's been tearing this place up over the weekend. He is in this race against Kenny Bernstein with a lane choice by a mile, a 485 to a 490 for Kenny Bernstein. There you see the onboard camera recording his burnout. But first, let's go down to Steve Evans.
A.J. Foyt once said, drivers drive cars, and you drove the heck out of this Dragster.
I'm really pleased. You know, Taco Bell, Jack Clark car just ran wonderful. The guys did a great job. You know, it's dry every time it comes down here, and you know, I can't ask for anything more. You know, obviously we'd love to be in the finals, but you know, it just gets tougher after every round.
I hope you had as much fun doing it as we did watching.
Well, I had a ball doing it. I wish I was around one more time, though.
Hey, they get greedy even at their first race.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to see a whole lot more of John Andretti as the season progresses, but right now, all eyes are on this pair of cars. Kenny Bernstein in the foreground, and that yellow automobile. What more can be said about Eddie Hill and his crew?
No underdog in 93, the best early season start ever for the Texan. He's won 2 races, he's the points leader, and he's got lane choice here. He is the favorite over Kenny Bernstein, and few have been able to say that. Whoa, Bernstein had a gorgeous hole shot off the starting line, but as you can see, he slowed, and Eddie Hill just thundered past in the nuclear banana, already celebrating the fact that he's going to the final round. Bernstein definitely had the advantage off the start, but Hill wins it with a 4.89 at 290. Another impressive pass.
So Kenny Bernstein loses, and he loses after a great launch. Terrific reaction time of 4.28 to a rather slow 4.95 for Eddie Hill. And it looks like Bernstein is on his way, except right here, he blazes the tires up in smoke, and that is the end of the race as Eddie Hill moves into the finals in convincing style. And of course, he will face young Mike Dunn and the GWYNN Top Fuel dragster, but Eddie Hill has lane choice by a mile. He is definitely the favorite.
With the sun beating down on this racetrack, there was some question as to the performance. Not now. Eddie Hill a 4.89.
4.89, we'll take it. 4.85 backed up 4.89. Lane choice going into the final. Oh, we're loving this. This new Pennzoil car is a keeper, I'd say, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Mike Dunn will be tough on that starting line. He's good.
Yeah, he will, and I need to do some work on that area, so I'll probably go back to the trailer and practice on my practice tree, try to get ready for the final.
Practice, practice, practice.
One happy man as we go back to the Warren Johnson pit area. He will face Frank Iaconio on the comeback in the Pro Stock semifinal. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Pro Stock, that's the Kurt Johnson car. They're getting it ready to face off with the Dodge of Scott Geoffrion in the Final Four. His dad has beaten Scott many times. Can Kurt? We'll find out. But first, a quick word about NHRA Now, presented by Castrol GTX. It's a 24-hour drag.
Let's go to the Funny Car Final Four, the first half. This is John Force versus a man who is upset-minded, Steve Evans, Tom Hoover. Showing some strength, and in fact, he's got lane choice.
In fact, he's got the best shot at John Force that about anybody's had all season long. Force had some problems in the second round. The body coming up here, that's standard operating procedure for this team. And actually, Hoover not only has lane choice, he has a 1/10 of a second advantage if you compare their times in the previous round. So the Hooves, as a lot of people call it, has got a good shot here against John Force. Hoover over in the far lane, out of Minnesota, John Force, Southern California. This could be a very, very interesting race. Hoover has been running this car very sensibly and quite easy, winning by only as much as he has to. I don't think he can afford that with Force, though.
No, he can't. But these are a couple of old pros. They're used to running on all different kinds of race surfaces. So here we go. John Force, a little haze inside that cockpit as Force drives by Tom Hoover into the Funny Car Final.
Whatever caused that car to stumble the previous round has been fixed. A 5.24 at 284 miles an hour for John. Bob?
5.24 at 284, and it looked like a pretty effortless pass, Austin.
Well, it put a cylinder out on this side way down track. We've made a lot of changes to keep up with the weather and the track and a little bit hard on it, but nothing we can't cope with. Looks like we're on the right track again anyway.
Lane choice going to be a factor in the finals?
Oh, probably not, because this is the lane that we wouldn't have taken if we'd have had choice, and it's probably good enough.
This car can beat you in either lane.
Okay, let's take another look at that race that put John Force into the Funny Car Finals. Here he is in the near lane. Neither guy gets off the line particularly well. They're pretty conservative. Nobody wants a red light here. And it is Force showing all kinds of strength mid-track. As he said, a 5.24 to a 5.30. Hoover tries to stay in it, but it's top-end power for John Force that puts him into the finals.
That was quite a drag race.
I don't know what happened up there, Steve. I was coming in the stage, and we put our lights on, and all of a sudden Hoover's light went on, and his lights went out, and I never let it break concentration, but it was kind of screwing my head up. I don't know if I left on time or what, but...
You were a little late, not bad.
Boy, he was out there, but it was a good old drag race.
5.24.
That'll put us back in the ball game, but we know Swearinger. We know how, him and Neely, they know how to improve that if they can get by this round, but we'll just see, because Etchell's running good, too. But I'm happy, and the car came back, so I can live with that.
All right.
Okay, what John Force is referring to is the other half of the Funny Car Final Four. That is Tim Richards working on Chuck Etchell's car. In the background, you see the nose of Freddie Neely and Steve Evans. Freddie Neely has been showing some strength.
There's a problem, I believe, with the Etchell's car. Tim Richards working on the fuel system. There was some communication between driver and crew chief just with their hands there. Maybe the idle was a little too high, and that sometimes makes it hard to get it into reverse after the burnout. Hard to say. But that's the car to watch. A 5.23 in the previous round. Ronnie Swearinger right there says okay to Freddie Neely. boy, that is an okay automobile today.
It sure is, and Freddie Neely can drive it. That's a guarantee, as can Chuck Etchells. This is going to be a good race.
Etchells was dead late off the starting line. But Neely has problems. Etchells goes into the final four at only 5:49, and Neely's 5:69. Bob?
Well, we were playing lucky on that deal. I don't know. He had to bring the motor up to get in the lights, and that was really the key. It put too much fuel in the motor, and the real problem is in the clutch right now.
That lane difference going to make any difference to you guys in the final, Tim?
I think this lane's fine.
That's great. They ran that 09 in that lane earlier in the weekend.
Still, though, they needed a little luck this time as Chuck Etchells gets by Freddie Neely, but not without a little bit of a break. As you can see, it's Etchells very late off the line, and suddenly Neely starts to pedal it. He loses traction right there, gets back into it here about half track, and then you see some more tire smoke off Neely's car, and that is enough to let Chuck Etchells late off the line into the finals. But it's a dubious distinction because he's going to really have to step up against John Force, who ran a 5:24 to Etchells' 5:49. Needless to say, Force has lane choice. Let's go to Steve with Freddie Neely.
Freddie, I know this has been a very tough weekend for you emotionally, but on the drag strip, it was pretty good.
Thank you, Steve. Like you said, it has been tough on me. We've been working with a little bit of a handicap here this weekend. The guys have done an excellent job on the car. I can't say enough about Ronnie Swearington's tuning. And like I told you so many times, Ronnie and I are real fortunate to have a car owner like Dick Brown, who supports us and tries to keep us going and working for sponsorship money.
Your win will come.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, Freddie Neely finished for the day and not happy about it, but we've got some other guys headed into the finals, including this car. That's Mike Dunn and Darrell Gwynn getting set to go against
Final
Freddie
four
Hill.
of Pro Stock. As they're getting these cars ready, let me take a moment to invite you to become a member of a very special. Is Scott GWYNN.
Scott GWYNN's got to get by Kurt Johnson, who's come into this sport and shown real skills on the line and driving a Pro Stock car like a veteran, really.
That's right, he had that nasty crash in Phoenix, but came right back. His reaction times haven't suffered from that at all. You're on board the only Dodge in Pro Stock. The Wayne County Speed Shop entry. You see GWYNN moving that 5-speed. Oh, he needed 6 speeds, apparently. Kurt Johnson, 720 to a 722, a terrific race. Neither driver needs to apologize for that. Johnson, 193 to GWYNN's 191, and they were dead even off the starting line, Brian.
They sure were. A 4.50 to a 4.54. That is dead even. Can't call anybody being late on the line at that rate, but it is. Kurt Johnson with the big power of that Oldsmobile that comes through in the end. I'll tell you what, GWYNN just seems to be snake bit. He made a good pass, a 722, and loses to a 720. Pushing Warren Johnson's Pro Stock car back after doing his burnout. They must have some problems with the reverse, and who's to know, there may be more transmission problems in there as well, Steve.
That's right, that is legal to do that as long as the car does its burnout properly. And we see crewmen running all over the place, apparently trying to ascertain just what the problem is. But Johnson is going to stage the car. In this game of reflexes, you just don't need any distractions whatsoever in a Pro Stock car. Iaconio, good hole shot, 0.05 of a second. The world champion at 4-lane, though, is going to still win it by a clean car length because he cards a 717 to Iaconio's 728 at 193 to Iaconio's 191 miles an hour. So it'll be Warren Johnson and Kurt Johnson in the Pro Stock final round.
You bet. And nobody's going to cut anybody any slack in that one, I'll guarantee you. Although Warren, the father, will have lane choice by just a hair.
Well, we've all heard of Johnny Hill, Fuzzy Carter, crew chief working on that all-important clutch. They are in the finals against Mike Dunn and the Darrell Gwynn car. Should be a great side-by-side race. Right now, for Pro Stock fans, we've got something that's never, ever happened before. Warren Johnson racing his son, Kurt Johnson, both from right down the road in Duluth, Georgia. You heard Kurt dedicate this race to his Georgia fans, and it should be a lot of fun. And there'll be no quarter asks given here, Brock.
No question about that. They, of course, have worked together for a long time. Kurt wrenched his father's car for a great deal of time in the early days, and now has moved into driving.
And driving very well. He went to the Roy Hill School down in Rockingham, North Carolina. and has shown great prowess off the starting line. Had a little rookie mistake in Phoenix, as I mentioned earlier, when he crashed. Earlier, I had a chance to talk to both these guys.
You know, Kurt, your best shot might be to hole shot the old man. What do you think?
Well, I plan on that. I know how much power he's got, so I think that's what it's going to take to beat him.
What kind of starting line trick?
No tricks. It'll just be who's got the better reaction, the young man or the old man.
Ooh. Well, there's two ways to attack it.
Yeah, and there comes Kurt Johnson to the line, going to stage very carefully against his father. And as you said, as you ask him, Steve, are there going to be any tricks? I don't think he can trick Warren Johnson.
No, I don't think so. Old age and treachery going for the Johnson, the elder Johnson. Youth and exuberance and enthusiasm for the younger Johnson. And the older Johnson has a little bit of a starting line advantage. Kurt got loose over the bumps. I think that's going to hurt him. You betcha. Warren Johnson takes it at 7:17, 193 miles an hour, to Kurt Johnson, 7:22, also 193 miles an hour.
Yep, it had again, but got himself some money and another win and another notch in his belt toward a Winston Championship repeat. But right now, it's money car action, Steve, and this is going to be an interesting one.
Force versus Etchells. Tremendous talent, not only behind the steering wheels, but also as far as the crews are concerned. I talked to both.
John, you're a poker player, and you got a hot hand. Everything on your side.
You ain't kidding there, Steve, but with Richards over there in that camp with Etchells, he's doing a good job. That hot rod had low ET here. I need an ace in the hole here. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, I think you ought to be worried. I think the general has something up his sleeve, and we're going to throw everything at him we got.
Is the track going to hold that?
I don't know. I don't know. But, you know, we know he just ran pretty good. We're going to try not to beat ourselves, but I think based on the run we made in the second round, there's Tim can figure it out.
And there is the general, Tim Richards, as the floor belt spins on the car of Chuck Etchells. Etchells sounded to me like they were just pulling out all the stops, Brock.
Well, they're going to have to because Force laid down that very stout run. But earlier, a 5:09 on the part of Etchells gives him a lot of hope.
Now, Etchells moved right up to the starting line. Bernie Federley points that out to Austin Coil. Coil says, hey, I'll do it my way. He's not going to be hurried. Look at this. Etchells is already up in staged and free stage, trying to put a little pressure on Force. And if I know Force right now, he's laughing.
Yeah, I mean, Force has seen it all. I don't think he can psych him out in any way on a direct strip.
May have just made him mad. Force was off the mark first and wins it with a hole shot. Etchells runs quicker at 5:28 to Force's 5:30. John Force, a brilliant driving job here in Atlanta today. Bob Fry's at the start.
Well, your driver's earning his money big time this year, Austin.
Boy, I'll say we just been fighting problems with drop cylinders and stuff this weekend, and during qualifying everything looked great, and today it don't look so good, but the driver earned his keep, and like he made up the difference, and we got to the winner's circle again.
And you've earned a new posture. You turn your back and you're not watching these races.
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay. I can't imagine him not watching this one because John Force in the near lane launches with a beautiful hole shot, and that is enough to win it from Chuck Etchells, who, as Steve said, runs a slightly lower ET. Starting line reaction, always critical in a drag race, and here you see it pay off for John Force by nearly a full car length.
I'd love to be at dinner tonight. John Force, a hole shot victory. You got bragging rights over Austin, a 28-30.
Hey, it was great. There's a whole lot of excitement. Went up on there. Etchells just went in. I thought, oh, he's making a power play here, but it was really neat. And always in the finals, take a final. The car ran good. Give it to the crew, Coil, Bernie, and my God, I'm dead for words here. I want to thank the Dorman guys, the Wax Shop, Oldsmobile especially, and Castro, Jolly Rancher. You know the routine, guys, but I want to take them in here just say hi to my mom. I never do. Mom, I love you. I'm taking you to Tulsa this week.
I don't know whether that's good or bad.
Here at the NHRA Fram Southern Nationals in Commerce, Georgia, the Top Fuel finale. Eddie Hill, the car he calls the new nuclear banana, accomplishing its burnout. And here the La Victoria Salsa car, Mike Dunn driving for car owner Darrell Gwynn. Now, you've heard a lot of crew chiefs use the term dropping a cylinder. It's not something you drop on your foot. It just means one cylinder isn't firing. Even with two magnetos and twin spark plugs in every cylinder, they have such a volume of fuel, they have a hard time lighting it off. And that's what it means. And if one cylinder isn't firing, then you're carrying along a dead soldier, and it just affects the entire combination and affects it very adversely. When you see a lot of raw fuel coming out of 1.5 going down the racetrack, Darrell Gwynn well knows the sight. That means you're dropping a cylinder. Well, I didn't drop the ball earlier. Before they got in the car, I talked to both of these drivers to get their impressions pre-final.
Eddie, can this car be flawless one more time?
Well, I don't know. It's got a pretty good start on it so far. I sure love the car. I'm sure it can make a mistake, but I hope it doesn't make one this next lap.
Mike, you need a 1/10 of a second to race Eddie Hill. You really do.
Yeah, we're going to try and get it out of this car. You know, we've had a few problems. It's running real consistent, but we had trouble with it spinning the tires out through the middle. We think if we can get it to quit spinning the tires out in the middle, we can step up a 1/10. You know, hopefully at least a high 80. It's going to be tough. He's going to run a mid to high 80 again, and I'm going to have to be on the line, but we're going to give him a race.
All right, we're ready for the top fuel final here at the Fram Southern Nationals. Remember, Steve, you talked about dropping a cylinder earlier. If you lose one, if it's 5,000 horsepower, you're talking about taking away almost 600 horsepower with a single cylinder going away.
That's right. One cylinder in one of these engines makes about as much power as an entire Winston Cup stock car. That'll give you some idea. Well, there's Eddie Hill. He always has a lot of raw fuel at the starting line. Nothing unusual there as he puts the fuel system on what they call the high side. Mike Dunn with a perfect light and loses traction. Mike Dunn got the light of his life at 4.00, but Eddie Hill, oh, Mike Dunn was right, 4.87 for Eddie Hill. Celebrate, Tex, 293 miles an hour.
What a tough break for Mike Dunn. As Steve said, a perfect light. You can't do it any better than that. Eddie Hill launches just a little bit later, a 450, not a bad light, but hardly enough to catch up Mike Dunn if he hadn't lost traction. Unfortunately, Mike does. He goes up in smoke, and Eddie Hill goes on to his third victory of the season here at Commerce, Georgia.
The Texas Terror took him to task today. Eddie Hill, congratulations. Third race this year. Great.
Oh, it feels so good, and we're first in the points and everything. Set a track record here, loyalty of the meet. The Pennzoil team did an outstanding job today. Fuzz and the guys, wonderful.
You say this car is identical to the old car, but it's more consistent. It doesn't smoke the tires like the old car.
Well, part of that may be as this hair gets a little grayer, we may get a little smarter on the chin-up on the clutch deal, but the car is great.
All right, you've got a 487 to put into that computer in the final round.
Oh, excellent. That's great. Yeah, that's a good backup for that 485 track record, and we've had a lot of 480s this weekend.
You realize you've got a legitimate shot at a Winston championship and all that money, 150 grand?
We really do. I can hardly believe it. The folks at Pennzoil did good hanging in there.
Great work, Eddie, and to your entire crew, congratulations, as well as to all the winners here at Commerce, Georgia. For Steve Evans and Bob Fry, I'm Brock Yates. Thanks for joining us.
The executive producer for American Sports Cavalcade is George E. Orgera. The supervising producer is Tom Gee. Produced and directed by Mark Kuchin. Promotional consideration provided for and a fee paid by this special offer from Diamond Fee.